A hand closes around a slab of green stone in the dark. No torch yet, only the outline of fingers. And the faint, wet gleam of something that should not be glowing on its own. 7 lines are carved into its surface. Nobody in the room can read them. That will not matter for very long. This is not a story about a rock. It is a story about what happens to a person who reads something they were never equipped to survive reading. By the time this ends, you will not think about knowledge the same way again. You will start wondering what you already know that you have never let yourself understand. That feeling, the one where an idea sits just behind your eyes, almost translated, almost yours. That is what the next 15 minutes are built to give you. Here is the question this entire film orbits. And I want you to sit with how impossible it sounds right now. What if the exact same 7-line instruction has been quietly rewriting the minds of the most powerful thinkers in history for over 1,000 years? And none of them fully understood what it was doing to them until it was too late to stop. Hold that. We are going to earn the answer. The object is called the Emerald Tablet, in Latin, Tabula Smaragdina. And the strange part is not that it exists. The strange part is that nobody has ever seen the original. What we have instead is a chain of copies, stretching back through history like a rope with the first several knots burned away. The earliest confirmed text appears in Arabic, in a work called Kitab sur al-Khalika, the Book of the Secret of Creation, compiled sometime in the 8th or 9th century and attributed to a shadowy figure named Belinus, often identified with the Greek philosopher Apollonius of Tyana. Inside that book is a strange origin story of its own, a sealed tomb. A corpse still seated upright on a golden throne. And in its hands, a tablet of green stone inscribed with instructions in a language no one in the room could read, until, somehow, they could. That's the myth layered onto the object before it ever reaches Europe. But myths get attached to things for a reason. Usually because the thing itself refuses to sit still and be ordinary. The name on the tablet is older than the tablet itself. Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes the thrice great, is not a single historical man. He is a fusion, built over centuries in Hellenistic Egypt, of the Greek god Hermes, messenger between worlds, and the Egyptian god Thoth, keeper of writing and secret knowledge. Whoever assembled that name was making a claim before the reader even reached the first line. This text does not belong to one culture. It belongs to the space between cultures, where knowledge is supposed to be untranslatable, and yet, apparently, was not. By the 12th century, an unnamed translator renders the text into Latin. And from there it moves like something with its own appetite, copied into alchemical manuscripts across France, Germany, Italy, England. Every serious student of the transformation of matter, for the next 500 years, is required to know these 7 lines by heart. And every single one of them reads the same closing sentence. And stops. Because the tablet doesn't end with a formula. It ends with a warning disguised as a signature, that what is written here is only complete, only true, in 3 parts of the wisdom of the whole world. Nobody who copied that line ever explained what the other 2 parts were. Which means every alchemist who touched this text for the next several centuries was working from a fragment. And knew it. Here is where the text stops behaving like history and starts behaving like something else. In the 15th century, an agent working for Cosimo de' Medici brings a related body of writing back to Florence, the Corpus Hermeticum, the larger philosophical library that Hermes Trismegistus was believed to have authored. Cosimo is dying. He is told his own translator, the scholar Marsilio Ficino, is only partway through translating Plato. Cosimo gives an order that tells you everything about how seriously this material was taken. Stop translating Plato. Translate Hermes first. A man on his deathbed, with limited time left to understand anything, chose the tablet's tradition over the philosopher considered the foundation of Western thought. The tablet itself is short. Depending on the manuscript, it runs somewhere between 7 and 13 lines. And most of it reads like a riddle deliberately built to resist a casual reading. It speaks of a father and a mother, the sun and the moon, that carry something inside the belly of the wind. It speaks of a single thing, born from a single source, through a single act of adaptation. It speaks of ascending from earth to heaven and descending again, gathering the power of what is above and what is below into one vessel. No furnace is named. No metal is named. And yet for 5 centuries, the entire discipline of alchemy insisted this was a recipe. The most famous line on the tablet, the only one most people have heard, even if they've never heard of the tablet itself, is this: as above, so below. 4 words, repeated in tattoos, memes, half-remembered horoscopes, stripped so far from context that most people who quote it have no idea it was carved onto a corpse's hands in a sealed tomb before it ever reached a printing press. But strip away the aesthetic, and the line makes an enormous claim. It says that the structure of the largest thing you can imagine, the movement of planets, the architecture of the cosmos, is identical to the structure of the smallest thing you are. Not similar. Identical. A mirror, not a metaphor. The tablet calls this correspondence. And it insists that everything in existence, from the position of a planet to the state of a single human soul, is written in the same code, at different scales. Now connect 2 things that were never supposed to touch. In the late 17th century, a scientist sits alone with his own handwritten Latin translation of this exact tablet. He has already changed the trajectory of physics forever. His name is Isaac Newton. And instead of publishing his work on the Emerald Tablet, he hides it, buried in private notebooks that were not opened publicly for over 200 years after his death. Those notebooks were eventually auctioned off at Sotheby's in 1936, and bought, almost as an act of disbelief, by the economist John Maynard Keynes, who read through them and reached a conclusion that shook the tidy story of Newton, the rational founder of modern science. Keynes said, in effect, that Newton was not the first scientist of the Age of Reason. He was the last of the great magicians. Why would the man who explained gravity spend years of his life translating a corpse's instructions from a sealed Egyptian tomb? Because he suspected, correctly, in the view of many historians of science, including scholars like Lawrence Principe, who has spent his career studying the real laboratory practices behind alchemical texts, that the tablet was not describing chemistry in the way modern readers assume. It was describing correspondence. The idea that transforming base metal into gold was never really about metal at all. Newton was careful. He kept this work private for good reason. A century earlier, the Hermetic idea that the cosmos was a single living, interconnected structure, not a machine built by a distant, separate god, had already gotten a philosopher killed. Giordano Bruno, drawing on the same Hermetic tradition that produced the Emerald Tablet, argued for an infinite universe woven together by a single animating principle. In 1600, he was burned at the stake in Rome. The idea on this tablet was not treated as decoration by the people who took it seriously. It was treated as dangerous. Because if it was true, it rearranged everything else you thought you knew about your place in the structure of things. This is where the descent gets personal, and where it stops being safe to treat this as an old curiosity. 3 centuries after Newton hid his notebooks, a Swiss psychiatrist named Carl Jung spends the final decades of his life doing something almost nobody in his profession takes seriously: reading medieval alchemical texts, including commentaries built directly on the emerald tablet, and treating them as psychological instruction manuals rather than failed chemistry. In two major works, Psychology and Alchemy and Mysterium Coniunctionis, Jung lays out his case in exhaustive detail, cross-referencing centuries of alchemical imagery against the dreams and inner lives of his own patients. Jung's conclusion is the contradiction this whole film has been circling. He argues that the alchemists were never actually trying to make gold. They were describing, in the only symbolic language available to them, the process of psychological transformation, what he called individuation. The base metal was the unexamined self. The gold was integration. The furnace was suffering. Jung even mapped the alchemist's own stages onto this process: the nigredo, a blackening; the psychological collapse where the old sense of self has to break down before anything new can form; the albedo, a whitening; the slow return of clarity once the wreckage has been sorted through; and the rubedo, a reddening. The final union, the moment the split between what a person shows the world and what they actually are, stops being a split at all. And the tablet, all along, was not a recipe for a laboratory. It was a map for a mind. So which is it? Is the emerald tablet a chemistry text that failed, a religious relic that lied, or a psychological diagram that succeeded so completely nobody noticed what it had actually been describing the entire time? Here is the thesis, and I want you to be able to repeat it back. The emerald tablet was never a set of instructions for changing matter. It was a set of instructions for recognizing that the pattern above you and the pattern inside you are the same pattern. And that transformation only happens once you stop treating them as separate. The evidence is not just in Newton's hidden notebooks or Jung's late career obsession. It is in the fact that the text survived over 1,000 years of copying, translation, and near total loss of its original source, and instead of decaying into nonsense the way most lost recipes do, it kept attracting the sharpest minds available in every era it touched: a Medici prince, the father of modern physics, the founder of analytical psychology. A false instruction does not survive contact with minds like that. A false instruction gets tested once, fails, and gets discarded. Consider what actually happened to the literal reading. Thousands of alchemists across centuries lit real furnaces, mixed real minerals, and tried to produce real gold from base metal. Every single one of them failed. If the tablet were only ever a chemistry manual, that failure rate should have killed it within a generation. Instead, the text got more prestigious with time, not less, read by physicians, by philosophers, by at least one future president of the Royal Society. The literal experiment failed constantly. The underlying pattern kept getting rediscovered anyway. By people working in isolation from each other, centuries apart, with no way to compare notes. That is the signature of something structurally true, dressed in a language that only reveals itself to a reader willing to stop looking for gold in the fire. This one was never simply discarded. It was tested, misunderstood as literal for centuries by lesser readers chasing gold in real furnaces, and then, slowly, privately, by the handful of people who actually understood what they were holding, read correctly. That is not superstition surviving by accident. That is a structure recognizing itself across centuries in every mind capable of reading it properly. Correspondence, recognizing correspondence. Go back to the room. The hand. The stone. The 7 lines nobody in the tomb could read. They could not read the words. But something in them still understood the shape of what they were holding, the way you understand the shape of a door before you know what's behind it. You have spent the last 15 minutes doing exactly what every real reader of this tablet has done for 1,000 years, waiting for it to become a story about metal. And slowly realizing it was a story about you. The tablet never needed to be translated. It needed to be recognized. As above, so below. So, quietly, and without asking permission, within.